So it seems Ruben Amorim is the next Manchester United manager, as they have triggered his €10 million exit clause. Funnily enough, this is the second time that a club has paid his exit clause, which speaks to how well his career has gone so far. And as a Benfica supporter, oh, thank God he's leaving Portugal. In fact, I made a video 3 years ago now calling Ruben Amorim the next managerial prodigy. It hasn't been confirmed yet whether those words will ring true, we still need a few more years, but he's certainly grown as a manager and gotten even better since then. Another thing I said in that video was that he hadn't really failed yet. Well, he had one season where Sporting finished fourth, and have they ever bounced back from that? But if Ruben Amorim wanted a big test for his career, then he certainly found it. So let's go through how he's gone from success to success in his relatively short managerial career, how he's faced challenges and overcome them, and a bit about how his team plays. After he retired as a player in 2016, Ruben Amorim began seeking out his coaching badges almost immediately. Funnily enough, he spent a week at Man United's Carrington while he was studying. In the 2018-19 season, he was the manager of Casa Pia, then in the third division of Portuguese football. But he was suspended and Casa Pia were punished with a 6-point deduction due to Amorim having not completed his coaching badges just yet. Later, the suspension was dropped, but Amorim resigned all the same. From there, he went back to Braga, one of the teams he represented during his playing career, and took over as the head coach of their reserve side. His time with the reserves didn't last too long, however, as 3 months after he became the head coach of the reserves, the first team head coach, Sapinto, an absolute nutcase, by the way, he was sacked. Who did they look to? Amorim, a relative greenhorn of a caretaker who was tasked with getting Braga back on track and trying to salvage their season. They were in 8th when he took over. But once again, he wasn't the caretaker for long. He didn't drop a single point for just over a month, and in his first official match, Braga smashed B-Sad 7-1. In that same first month, he beat FC Porto 1-0 in the Taça da Liga, or the League Cup final. I mean, silverware in your first month or so, that's not bad at all. In his second month, February, he helped Braga defeat Benfica away, something they hadn't done in 65 years at that point. In fact, he didn't lose a single match domestically with Braga. His 2 losses came in the Europa League against Rangers, and then Sporting stepped in. Now, let's pause for a second here and sort of look at the board. Amorim's first match in charge of Braga's first team, his first ever first team job in the top flight, was on January 4th, 2020. He won silverware by the end of that month. He never lost a domestic match with Braga in 2 months, and he was only with Braga's first team for 2 months. Yes, that's all it took to convince Sporting that Ruben Amorim was the guy to get them back on track to lead Sporting to success once again. Sporting had success in the domestic cups in the 21st century, but they hadn't won the league since 2002. It's not an exaggeration to say either that Bruno Fernandes was carrying Sporting much of the time he was there, almost single-handedly, winning them cups. I mean, he was unbelievable. And so once he left, Silas, the coach of Sporting, struggled to find success. March 4th, 2020, 2 months after Ruben Amorim's first match with Braga, Sporting paid €10 million to sign Ruben Amorim, making him the third most expensive managerial signing in football history at that time. Amorim saw out the season with 6 wins, 3 draws, and 2 losses with Sporting. His only losses against Porto and Benfica. Well, you probably are well aware of what he did in his first full season with Sporting. For the first time in 19 years, Sporting won the league, and they were easily the best team in the 2020-21 season in Portugal. Amorim's style of play, which we will speak of in a moment, was accentuated beautifully by his mix of savvy signings like Pedro Gonçalves from Famalicão, as well as his utilization of Sporting's academy, something that Ruben Amorim has never shied away from and has never hampered Sporting's results either. Sporting at that time wasn't as beautiful to watch in the attack as they are now, as some key arrivals would help to change the team for the better going forward in the seasons to come. But they were miserly defenders, and they lost just a single game all season long in the league. They also won the League Cup in that first season, beating his former fling, SC Braga 1-0 in the final. 2 cups and a league title in 1.5 years of top-flight employment is not so bad at all, is it? And the notable thing about it is that Sporting isn't exactly a club that would spend big on signings like Benfica was and still does. In total for that title-winning season, Sporting spent about 42 million euros, spread across 5 different signings. That's an average of about 8.4 million euros per signing. Instead, as mentioned, he wasn't afraid of utilizing academy players, turning to Gonçalo Inácio and turning him into one of the best defenders in the Portuguese league. He is the best right now. In his second full season with Sporting, they finished in second, but won the League Cup once again. 3 years in a row that Ruben Amorim won that trophy. He owned it for 3 years. In my previous video, I had said that it was hard to get a read on Ruben Amorim and what he was sort of made of, because everything he had done thus far had saw him become successful. He won silverware in 2 months at Braga. He won the league and cup in his first full season in charge at Sporting. He won a cup in his second full season. And then there was the 22-23 season, his most difficult. Now, to be completely fair to him, Amorim lost João Palhinha to Fulham, Pedro Porro to Spurs, that was a January transfer, and Mateus Nunes to Wolves, all in that one season. Massive pieces of the squad. That explains why Sporting struggled a bit. The board had been completely reshuffled. For the first time in his career, Amorim lost the League Cup final, Sporting finished 4th in the league, and exited the Champions League in the group stage. And so how did he answer my question of how he would bounce back from a failure, if you want to call it a failure? Sporting, thanks in part to signing Viktor Gyökeres, but mainly down to Amorim finally having an attack that could complement his defense, stormed Portugal. They score 96 goals, lose just 2 matches in the league, and finish 10 points clear of second place Benfica, as Sporting got 90 points, beating their points total from 2021. And what about the season so far, 24-25? They're on track, or they were under Amorim at least, but they're on track for something special. Sporting have dropped points just once, a 1-1 draw with PSV in the Champions League. Well, I guess they lost the Portuguese Super Cup on penalties as well, if you care about Super Cups, Community Shields, and the like. Personally, I don't really count them as anything. But in the league and the Portuguese Cup, they have won every single game. They have scored 30 goals in the league already and conceded just twice in their 9 wins from 9. In total, Sporting have scored 43 goals across all competitions and conceded just 5. They haven't conceded a goal in the league since the second match day, and they're in the semi-finals of the League Cup once again. They've won 2 of 3 matches in the Champions League and are still going in the Taça de Portugal. It's been special stuff from Amorim, so how are they doing it? Guys, I'm not a tactico. If you want an in-depth analysis that includes words like relationism, game state, pitch tilt, post-variance shot actuality, I made up that last one. But if you want that, I'm not your guy. I'll be open and honest with you here. But if you want a really strong general idea of how Sporting play, then I've got you. A workman-like look at it. So the basics are that he plays a 3-4-3 or any kind of variation on it. In practice, it often looks like a 3-4-2-1, as most of the width comes from the wide midfielders or wingbacks, as the 2 inside forwards behind the striker tend to tuck in a bit to create a numerical advantage in the attack through the middle, or make overlapping runs. Sporting tend to play a high possession game. They are incredibly efficient on the counter, of course, as Sporting has very fast forwards and guys like Marcus Edwards and Viktor Gyökeres, but over the years as Amorim has developed as a coach and his Sporting squad have improved under him, they have become more and more ball dominant in Portugal, averaging 65% possession in this season. In the Champions League, where they faced Lille, PSV and Sturm Graz, that's been knocked down to 50% on average. But they press with great intensity. They typically look to win the ball up the pitch rather than sit back and be patient. Again, they can do both. But this season, they've most often done the former, as they play with a fairly high line, and their pressing intensity, again, is quite high. Speaking of possession, all of his center backs are ball-playing center backs. Diomande, in particular, is very impressive in that regard, but Gonçalo Inácio and De Bast are no slouches either. Sporting like to work the ball up from the back, with the keeper playing a role in that as well. Andre Onana will be thrilled. And honestly, Amorim will be thrilled to have him splitting those center backs and being an outlet. As they try to progress the ball, you'll be very familiar with their shape, as a ton of teams have moved into a 3-2-4-1 while in possession. Think of City in 22-23 and how John Stones would join the midfield. That kind of shape, as you can see here, except the 2 midfielders make up the two, rather than a center back joining and becoming the two. Once the ball progresses, his front three are extremely dynamic, as Gyökeres and Edwards often will swap positions, with the Swede moving out wide and the Englishman into the middle. The striker, Gyökeres in this case, is equally adept at holding up the ball, as well as running at defenders and making runs in behind, and while they attack, it's like a wave. The front three joined by the wing backs, and at times the central midfielders will join in on the fun as well. When appropriate, of course. The wide players will look to stretch the back line out, which leaves gaps through the middle for Amorim's side to play through. This means that the threat is kind of everywhere, through the middle with quick passes, or long balls to the wide players as well. This makes them a very, very difficult opponent, as they can hurt you in many ways. They can sit back, defend, which they do extremely well, and then hurt you on the counter. Speaking of which, last season only Arsenal and Feyenoord had a lower non-penalty expected goals than that of Sporting, which is very, very impressive. They can keep hold of the ball, stretch out your back line, and then play through the middle or the wide areas. No matter to them, they create a ton of chances for themselves either way. They can be clean in their passing and build up, or they can be direct and make you chase them down the wings. Now, Sporting themselves released an official statement saying that Manchester United are willing to pay Ruben Amorim's exit clause, and now Sporting and United are just trying to come to an agreement on when Amorim will actually join them. The hang-ups are that Sporting want additional compensation in order to release Amorim's entire coaching staff to go with him to United, and they allegedly value that at around an additional 5 million euros, as well as an additional fee for an immediate release, as in with some exit clauses in Portugal. Even when the exit clause is triggered, it only comes into effect 30 days after the date it's triggered. But all things point to Ruben Amorim being Manchester United's head coach in the future, and it's just a question of when, not if, he will be there. But you never know until everything is finalized, right? These things can break down at the last second. It doesn't seem likely, that's for sure. It seems like it will happen, but you never know. You never know. So will he be a success at Manchester United? I mean, it's United. I mean, who knows these days, right? Given his record at Ajax, I thought Erik ten Hag was going to be a success, but his football was horrid to watch. And while he won cups, yes, United were brutal in the league. One thing I can say for sure is that he is much more charismatic and way better with the media. Even in Dutch, people spoke of how prickly Ten Hag could be with the media, while Amorim is much more affable and easygoing. He's not a pushover in the slightest. He can be firm with the media when needed, but he's far more charismatic and realistic. He won't try to hide from any truths. Will that carry over in English? Well, he's quite decent at speaking English already, actually.
I like it because he's fair most of the times. I know that there's a lot of problems sometimes, because it's a hard decision. But like I said, I didn't see the footage.
With Amorim, like I said, he's gone from success to success to success, and he hasn't spent a ton of money along the way given the club he was coaching. Now, if he is given time to imprint his style upon this United side, I think that things could actually work out quite well. Just look at this projected lineup. I mean, sure, you could maybe need a new left wing back, given Shaw is never fit and has setback after setback, but for the most part, you can see how this group of players playing in Amorim's style could be a massive improvement on what we've seen from United recently. I know, they're 14th, so the bar is not very high, but you know what I mean. As a Benfica supporter, he and Victor Gyökeres are the two individuals that I have been jealous of the most at Sporting recently. And Gyökeres' success, a lot of it at least, comes down to Ruben Amorim's tactics. It's promising that after finishing 2nd and 4th, Sporting improved again, and after the start he's had this season, it's safe to say he has bounce back ability. But will he be given the time to bounce back if he has a slow start at United while his completely new tactics sink in? Who knows? They showed patience with Ten Hag last season and at the start of this one, so you'd expect the same for Amorim, given new owners, there's been a bit of a squad clear out, and it seems like this is their chosen man for a new project. Personally, like allegiances aside, seeing a young, exciting Portuguese coach playing in this kind of style, I hope it goes well. Anyways, that's it for me, guys. I hope this was helpful, and if it was, do me a favor and drop a like. It's free. Other than that, I'm Adrian, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.